Yo, I'm Kyle Potter, and I get to start this week's episode here with Gunnar Olson, or should we call you Gunnar Olson 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 Olson?
I've been called that, yeah, and it's partially my fault, but also Avianca has a lot to do with it.
So, in last week's episode of the podcast, you teased our listeners about just how monumentally, or perhaps not so monumentally, you might have screwed up a plane ticket and resulted in having your last name on your boarding pass 3 times. So, I think the floor is yours now. You get a tight, 60 to 90-second window to explain exactly what went wrong and how you fixed it.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple story with maybe a lesson for some people out there. But when I fill out forms online, I use that autofill feature from Google Chrome that kind of lets you just throw some information in. And I was putting together my loyalty account with Avianca Life Miles, which, if you've used the program before, you know it's pretty quirky, to say the least. And
this was your first mistake. I think
Yes.
we can agree. It's using Avianca Life Miles. It is a notoriously temperamental airline with not the best website.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal, but the rates are undeniable, and I chased after some incredible rates to get my wife and I back from our honeymoon. But when I was filling in my information for my loyalty account, I used the autofill and pressed go. And what I found was after I booked a ticket, my name was Gunnar, middle name Olson, last name Olson. So on the ticket, it was showing up as Gunnar Olson Olson, which does not match my passport. So I was like,
No, it does not.
oh boy, I got to go figure this out because I'm not getting denied boarding at 2 a.m. at the Nairobi airport. So I called Avianca, got a very nice guy on the phone who was really happy to help me. And we had this thing buttoned up in like 20 seconds. I was like, yeah, it says Gunnar Olson Olson. I just need to take one of the Olsons away. So it's just Gunnar Olson. He goes, I got you, sir. Thank you so much for, booking with Life Miles, and I'll talk to you next time. I refreshed the page, and he just tacked on another Olson to the end of my last name. So it was Gunnar Olson Olson Olson. And I was just apoplectic. I called back, and I was about ready to snap at this point. And a really, really kind lady picked up the phone, and I explained to her what was going on. And the first thing she said to me was, sir, I don't think I can add another Olson to this. I was like, no, I don't want you to add another Olson to this, please.
The more Olsons, the merrier, I think, is the takeaway from this so far.
Yeah. So in the end, I was able to strip 3 of those Olsons off the reservation, and I was able to get home on my honeymoon. But yeah, if you're going to book with Life Miles, just know that customer service can be a little tricky, and also just don't use autofill. It's so dumb. It's a terrible time calculus for me. Whatever time I save, it's just never worth the headaches that autofill gives me.
I think had I been in your shoes, rather than calling Avianca and trying to get the ticket changed, I might have tried to legally change my name to be Gunnar Olson Olson, just because in most cases that might be an easier path to a resolution.
Yeah, seriously, it's Life Miles is always going to make it tough for you. But we've got a lot more than that today on the show. We're going to discuss some game-changing news at our favorite website, Google Flights, and in our featured segment called The Extra Mile, we're going on safari. Kyle and I are going to show you how we each book safaris using points and miles, including what we'd maybe do a little differently if we were to do it next time. Welcome back to the Thrifty Traveler Podcast. All right, let's jump into something hot and something cold, where we look at the good and the bad news out there for travelers from the last week. And we're going to start with something hot, as always. So last week, I was working with the premium team on a flight deal. We found some great fares to Hawaii, under 500, under 400 round trip from some cities, like a nationwide deal. That's not the point of what we're talking about here. But I was vetting a deal.
That is always something hot, however, just so we're clear. We are in support of cheap flights to Hawaii.
Yes, and we always find them. It's one of our favorite things to do. So I was looking through some of these fares and just vetting them to make sure that everything was correct. So we sent our subscribers good fares. And what I noticed at the top of the Google Flights page was this little banner that said basic economy, which I've never seen before. So I clicked the drop down arrow, and where you usually see economy, premium economy, business, and first, now there's a little basic at the top with a little sentence under it, and then an economy at the top with a little sentence under it that said includes fares that offer seat selection and a carry-on bag. And it was full-on alarm bells at Thrifty Traveler headquarters. This new filter is basically a main cabin filter for travelers. Right now, it's only working in select areas in the U.S. and Canada. And not every user is seeing it right now either.
Right.
So it's clear that they're testing it. But this is huge news for us, for people who search for airfare all day, every day. But is this too nerdy that I'm really excited about this, Kyle? Does anybody care except for people like me?
And if they don't, I think they should. I mean, this is far and away the single most requested feature of Google Flights, which not just you and I, everybody on the team, most people in the world consider the best flight deal search engine out there. And we have heard for years, I don't want to fly basic economy. I don't even want to see those fares. I don't want to search for a flight from Minneapolis to Denver and see a fare for $124, only to click through and see that's basic. And if you want a main cabin fare where you get to pick your seat for free, you can change or cancel your tickets for free, all of the above, that's going to cost you another $80, sometimes $100 or more round trip. If you're talking about Europe, that price differential is $200 or more round trip. This is, like I said, the single most requested feature we've ever heard of. We wrote a story about just kind of posing the question just over a year ago. Could this ever happen? And, I think at the time when we published that story, we were shocked that it hadn't yet. But the day has come. Like you said, not everybody has access to this yet. It's clear that they're testing it on a limited basis with, some amount of users. So you might go to your phone or your desktop and search for something and not see this. Others might. But if this becomes widespread, I do think this is a game changer for how people search for airfare.
Yeah, they're definitely rolling it out slowly, like you said. And that's because, especially once you start going overseas or you start going to, Central America and South America, where there are lots of other low-cost carriers with very strange fare structures, this gets really tricky. So they're starting slow here and just going with the airlines that, where the basic economy and the main cabin all pretty much look the same. And that's with, the big 4, big 5 carriers here in the US. But I know that we hear from a lot of subscribers that they still want to see basic economy.
Right.
A lot of people out there who still love basic economy fares. And after we put out this news, we heard from a lot of people who are saying, please don't stop sending me the lowest fares, because that's the stuff I'm interested in booking. For me, I love main cabin fares. I don't really book below that typically, just because I need that flexibility and peace of mind. But if this is just a really great way for people to kind of get away from that fare that comes with nothing. Those fares that I really hate, and a lot of travelers are really annoyed with when they get, like you said, lured in by $120 fare, only to see that it's $350 at checkout, and they can't figure out why.
Right. Yeah. And so for those of you who are in Gunnar's boat, this is amazing news. And I think we all have to keep our fingers crossed that this is going to become more widespread. If you do gladly book basic economy in order to save $70, $100, $200 per ticket, nothing's changing. I mean, even if this becomes, adopted widespread, it becomes a fixture on Google Flights, you're still going to be able to search for and find basic economy fares, no problem. It's just for those of you out there who are avoiding basic economy like a plague, this is going to make it so much easier just to not even be tempted by those cheaper fares. And in many cases, I think people get a little upset when they are kind of hoodwinked into thinking they're getting a better deal, and then eventually see, the fare that I actually want is going to cost me significantly more. Mm-hmm. We reached out to Google to see, what they had to say about this, whether they are in fact testing something. Spoiler alert, we know they are. They don't need to tell us that. But we did also ask, is this something that, users can expect to become a fixture for Google Flights? And we got a very polite no comment. So I think we just have to stay tuned and hope that this does become more widespread.
Yeah, definitely. One more thing to add on this is just that all of our favorite little features of Google Flights, like Google Flights Explore, the Explore map, where you can just put in the dates that you want and just look around the globe to see what the cheapest date is. This isn't really working for this filter yet, from the last time I checked at least. So hopefully they have some bugs to work out, and that's totally fine. If they want to keep using me as a test subject here, I'm happy to use it, because this is pretty awesome news for people like me. But let's switch over to something cold, or maybe something getting cold. Kyle, how would you explain this?
Something lukewarm? I don't know. Yeah, we might need to retitle this segment for this week, because it's definitely not cold. I would say it's still hot. The 100,000 point offer on the Chase Sapphire Preferred is still out there. But, we've been asking the question internally and publicly on our website, how much longer can this last?
Yeah, and I think our team has kind of some insights into this just because they've been doing this for so long. But obviously, this deal, which is 100,000 Chase Ultimate Rewards when you spend $5,000 in 3 months, when you sign up for the Chase Sapphire Preferred card, it's exceptional. It's probably it feels too good to be true, but it's definitely too good to last. Right? We're not going to be sitting on this for months and months here. But especially given like the state of the economy right now, do you think the banks might be a little worried and might fold up shop early here? What do we think in terms of the timeline of all this?
Are you asking me to predict what's going to happen to the economy? Because this is the wrong podcast, man. No, Jackson on our team, Jackson Newman, our credit cards guru, wrote a really smart story because Chase isn't saying exactly how long this is going to last. But, in a lot of cases with this stuff past his prologue, we can just look at the history of how banks have handled this and just kind of think logistically about what Chase is trying to do. What is Chase trying to do? They are trying to just pile people in to their ecosystem. And there is no way more effective to do that than to lure people in with a 6-digit bonus like this. And it really is ultimately a marketing move. This is what moves the needle most. It's the most effective way to recruit new customers and then eventually get them to, maybe open a checking account or a business account, whatever else they can do, but they need to get their hooks in people first. So, and beyond that, we looked at the history of how Chase has handled similar offers. We've talked before in our emergency episode of the podcast. This is the first time we've seen an offer of 100,000 points on the Chase Sapphire Preferred card in just under 4 years. The last time that Chase did this, that offer lasted a couple of months. In the years since, they've rolled out smaller bonuses, and those have lasted, in some cases, just a couple of weeks or a month. So, trying to read the tea leaves and give people some guidance about how long they have to jump on this, I think the best advice we can give is don't wait. We don't expect this to last much longer than a month and a half, maybe 2 at the absolute most, but that seems really iffy. So, considering that this rolled out in early April, I mean, if you get into the month of May and you haven't made the moves in order to open this card, if you already have it, to downgrade your current card, wait a week, and then apply again outright to be eligible for this new bonus, provided it's been more than 4 years since you were in the last one, you got to get moving. You got to get moving fast.
Yeah, I would say the next time you might see a bonus like this might be 2029 at this rate. So I would probably not wait. Don't get left behind, and don't be 1 day late to this incredible deal if you're eligible for it. All right, it is time for the extra mile topic, where we dig into something a little deeper in the world of travel. And this week we're doing something that Kyle and I have wanted to do since we started this thing here, and that's talk a little bit about safaris. The African safari has been a tentpole of travel for a long, long time.
I mean, it's synonymous with bucket list, really. Yeah. It always has been for me, and I think the same for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've been thinking about them forever, and when I kind of finally saw the light with points and miles and realized I had the opportunity to pull it off with a little bit of style, I definitely figured that I needed to do it. But obviously, all these places, the tricky part here is that these African destinations like the Masai Mara in Kenya, or the Serengeti in Tanzania, or like the gorilla trekking areas in Uganda and Rwanda, it's really far away. And it usually requires a day's worth of travel each way. So there's a comfort factor there. Plus, what you're looking at is that day's worth of travel can get really expensive. And once you get to Africa, you could also get stuck at a resort that's really remote and end up paying resort prices for the length of your trip as well. And $10,000 or more is not out of the question if you're going to do this with cash, but that's where points and miles come in, right, Kyle?
Can I stop you, because I'm not ready to talk about safaris yet?
Oh yeah. Now he's ready to talk about safaris.
Now I'm ready. Okay, we can talk about booking safaris now. Just get this on.
The costume contest, I actually left my hat at home because I didn't think it would fit over or under my headphones, and now I'm super jealous.
Spoiler alert, it does not.
No, it looks good on you, though.
Thank you.
So when it comes to safaris, I think points and miles can help to do things like cover the cost of your flights and hotels and some of that in-between stuff that really adds up. But Kyle and I both pulled a safari trip like this off. Mine was back in 2022. Kyle's was very recently. And we actually took very different trips and took different, approaches to doing this. So we're going to go through each of our trips and give each other some questions and kind of see what we liked about it, what we maybe would do differently next time. I definitely have a lot that I learned from that trip that I would possibly do differently. And thanks to our Thrifty Traveler Premium Hotels team, I have regrets almost every day about what I could do differently. Thanks a lot, guys. But yeah, let's dig into it. Anything before I start with my trip, Kyle?
I mean, my trip was more recent than yours, but I would assume that it's still just so fresh in your memory because it's truly not just one of the best travel experiences I've ever had. It's one of the best experiences in my life, period. And something that I would not have been able to do if not for, not just, redeeming points and miles, which of course is a big piece of what we're talking about here, but also just like some general travel tips about flexibility, about using benefits that we both have on some credit cards that we have in order to lower the ultimate out-of-pocket cost of this, which, as you noted, I mean, safaris are not just synonymous with bucket lists, it's also synonymous with expensive. And when you talk to most people who have been on safari and paid out of pocket for that, it probably starts at $10,000 and easily goes far, far north of that, double if not triple. And neither of us can afford a $10,000 vacation. Neither of us paid even close to that amount. I feel pretty safe saying.
Yeah, not even close. And, this is why people think of it as a trip of a lifetime and not, another trip, right? And it still is the trip of a lifetime in that the experience is so special, but it doesn't have to be, this is the only time that you'll ever get to Africa, because once you see what's possible and with enough advanced planning, crucially, these trips are not terribly hard to pull off as long as you're okay with a little bit of travel, which if you're listening to this show, I really, really hope you are.
You're in a good place.
Yeah.
All right, Gunnar, tell us about your safari. Where'd you get started with this, and how'd you wind up deciding where you wanted to go and how you were going to get there?
Yeah. So this was my honeymoon, and I've talked a little bit about that on the show already. But basically, my first criteria for the honeymoon was I kind of wanted to go someplace I had never heard of before. And so we found the island of Zanzibar and realized that you could fly Qatar business class there. And so that was kind of the impetus for it. And then I thought to myself, I'm already in Africa, like Africa's not this vast, incredibly huge place. It's like, well, I'm already in Chicago. No, Africa is so big, but Zanzibar and Nairobi are about a 3-hour flight from each other. So we flew to Zanzibar on Qatar Airways business class. And I don't say Q suites because this was about a month before the World Cup and they had switched out Chicago. So they switched Q suites out on us. So we were in a regular 222 business class. But for what we had flown at the time, it was still the coolest thing we'd ever experienced. And
I don't think either of us are ever going to complain about flying business class.
Yeah.
That said, there is something very special about flying Q suites where you have your own suite. If you're flying with a companion, you can drop the wall down in between the middle and basically form a double bed. It's not quite that, but it's pretty close. So my heart hurts for you a little bit, but knowing that you still had an amazing flight and where you were going, I think everybody can kind of get over it.
Yeah, no, we were totally fine. Actually, when we're about to land in Doha and the flight attendant comes up to us, he goes, "Have you ever heard of our Q suites? It's like way better than this. You should come back next time and try that." And I was like,
salt
thanks,
in
pal.
the wound.
Thanks. Been trying to 10 years to impress my wife. Still haven't done it. Thanks to this flight attendant. Great work, man. But to book that, we used 75,000 American Airlines miles each way. We booked them about 9 or 10 months ahead of time, which back then was still possible. It's almost impossible to pull off this booking now with American Airlines miles. I'd recommend that you use British Airways Avios, which are transferable from whatever points currency you have.
Well, and this is a pretty key differentiator between how you booked your trip and how I booked mine. In that, you booked this trip 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was just in early 2025, and the world of booking Qatar Airways, which was also involved in our trip, has completely changed in those 3 years. So I had also hoped to book Qatar Airways using American Advantage miles. Was not a thing by the time this trip started to come about for us.
Yeah. So that part was tricky. We actually signed up for the Barclays Aviator card, the American Airlines card, and got 70,000 point bonuses on those with one swipe. I bought a pack of gum. My wife bought her mom and dad a Christmas tree that year, and that was what got us to Zanzibar. So, and then we bought the miles on top of that bonus. So we saw the space was dwindling, and so we went ahead and just bought 10,000 AA miles, which I actually don't remember what it costs, and I didn't write it down.
Whatever it cost, it was well worth it to pull off the redemption you did. All right, keep going.
If you want to hear about the Park Hyatt Zanzibar, I talked about it in the emergency episode about the CSP 100K bonus. So go ahead and check that out. But I used that bonus the first time I got it to book that stay, which was unbelievable. And then we booked just a cash flight with Kenya Airways to get from Zanzibar to Nairobi, which is kind of where our journey began. So I think those flights in between were about 200 a piece. They fluctuate. It's a cash flight.
Right.
So just keep an eye on that. And obviously there are ways to cut some costs there. We booked a prepaid car transfer from Nairobi to Wilson Airport in Nairobi. So the big international airport is not where you fly out to get to the bush. It's not where you go to get to the Masai Mara, which was our final destination. And I would just highly recommend having a car scheduled ahead of time and giving yourself lots of time between those two airports. The traffic in Nairobi was insane, not like nothing I've ever sat in before. So much so that there are people walking down the street like hot dog vendors at a baseball game, like selling you stuff on the freeway because everyone's sitting in traffic for so long. But that was eye-opening. But give yourself time on that transfer if you're doing it. So we get to...
Did you get a hot dog?
No, I did not. The windows stayed rolled up. My wife was a little sketched out by the whole street vendor situation. And our driver did tell us, he's like, probably don't buy anything from these people. We were like, sounds good. But we got to Wilson Airport, which is not a traditional airport in any way. It's kind of just like, it's kind of like an FBO, but you're pulling up into the driveway of the airline that you're taking. So we flew Safari Link, and I'll put a photo of our Safari Link plane in there. But this was about $400 round trip a piece. So this was actually the priciest flight of the entire trip, which is hilarious because it was about 45 minutes and in a 8-seater plane with some commercial service out of Nairobi Wilson Airport.
And had you booked your Qatar Airways flights with cash business class instead of with miles, that probably would have been in the neighborhood of $4,000 or more each way per person.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for the most expensive flight of your trip to the Masai Mara to go on safari to be a $400 round trip bush flight is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was actually incredible. And it was a really fun flight too. It's beautiful. They fly low. They're just little prop planes. And they actually they go buzz the runway before they land just to clear the wildlife off, and then they circle back and land.
That is so cool. I had never thought of that.
Yeah, it was awesome because obviously when we got to the airport, and I'll provide a photo for the YouTube here too of this airport, the Musiara airstrip, which is just a bench on a field next to a runway, a little grass runway, and it was just exceptional. And we land there. Obviously, there's no spotters or anything, so they have to go take it. They go look over the runway, buzz real low to make sure the animals all stay off, and then they come back and land. It was very cool.
And then you get out and you go to the world's greatest airport arrivals lounge.
Yeah, the best arrivals lounge.
Yeah,
it was awesome. We had so when we got there, we had a guide from the Neptune Mara Rianta luxury tented camp, which is where we stayed in the Masai Mara. And the guide was waiting there with his truck. He picked us up and he said, "I'm your guide for the whole week." And he was our guy every single time we went out. It was just us two in a truck with him. And so let me tell you a little bit about this camp. I found it because I was just on Capital One's travel portal, just looking for some places to stay. At that point, I was not flush with hotel points at all. So I was just looking for a good value out there. And this place, Neptune, showed up a few times on some lists of places that are good to stay as well. They don't have a loyalty program at all, and they actually sell a lot of packages, so you can get your airfare included as well in a lot of cases. But because of Capital One, I wanted to book through them, so we just did the airfare separately. But it was about $2,200 for 4 nights. So we did pay cash for this. We booked it through Capital One while I was working on my Venture X sign up at the time. So we earned a bunch of miles on it, which is great. And we also got to use the $300 travel credit, which knocked it down below $2,000.
Let's stop and appreciate.
Yeah.
Paying under $2,000 for a 4-night stay at a luxury safari camp. I mean, this is where, a lot of places, whether you're redeeming points or using credit card perks or whatever, I mean, that starts with a 10 and it goes up from there pretty quickly in most cases.
It was, I think there was a little bit of kind of post-pandemic pricing going on. I think the same camp's a little more expensive. I actually didn't check before this, but it was a ridiculous value, I thought, and it was all-inclusive for food, drinks, alcoholic drinks. There's a big pool, some activities and stuff at night, too. Every night, all the guides who are native Masai sit around the campfire, and a lot of the, I would say, elderly Brits in the group were mostly sitting at the bar, and my wife and I would go down to the campfire and just pepper questions at these guys, these guides all night, and it was really fun, really, really cool hearing a native Masai telling the story and about his first lion kill and ribbing the guy who hadn't had one yet, and it was like being in a locker room I'd never been in before. But that was special.
There is an element of kind of sport to this and a competitiveness. I mean, I'll save kind of the bulk of my experience for after the break, but I mean, I vividly remember, us being with our guide in a car and like the rush that these guides get when they find something first and then give us, like a couple of minutes alone with this pride of lions before calling it in to the rest of the guides that are in the area. And, within a couple of minutes, they all come speeding up and break and get there. But, our guides were so proud of tracking this pride before anybody else, or tracking a leopard before anybody else in the area could spot it.
Yeah, it's so cool. And yeah, they are like pretty competitive with each other, but these people know the land so insanely well. And it's really special to see the connection they have with the place, but that's neither here nor there with points and miles, but still just things I think about every day about my safari. But yeah, so at the camp, the game drives were about $70 a day. And again, you can book bundles through Neptune and get those paid for ahead of time. We just paid for them one by one because we weren't sure which ones we wanted to do and everything. And so we were assigned a butler when we got there, and our butler would come find us during happy hour every night and ask, like, what are you guys thinking for tomorrow? And the options were you could go out really early in the morning, like a 4:30, 5 o'clock start. Mm-hmm. Or you can go out from and then you're back by lunch, or you could go out for like a 9 to 5. And we did the kind of full day one the first day, but the best ones were super early in the morning. We had some incredible times. They bring coffee out for you. They make you some breakfast. It was a really, really cool experience. I was very pleased with doing the early morning drives, especially. So yeah, we had 4 unbelievable days there. Couldn't recommend Neptune enough. I'll mention that our hotels team at Thrifty Traveler Premium did send an alert for the JW Marriott Masai Mara, which, looking at the photos of that place, I was like, maybe I could have done a little better on this. But we had an awesome experience. But if I had 122,000 Marriott points per night, I would have definitely booked that. That place looks stunning too.
Well, this is the beauty of points and miles, is that nothing has to be a one and done. You can always go back and do more. You can go back to a place and do it a little bit differently, using what you've learned in order to do that. And just since we've sent that deal, our hotel team, to the JW Marriott and the Masai, a handful of new properties bookable with hotel points, in particular with Marriott, are opening in the months and years to come. So there's going to be even more to pick from when you and the wife are ready to make your return trip. Yeah. So other than that, what was like the biggest, you got to do what we did, and what was the biggest, you got to learn from our mistake?
Yeah, I would say some of the things we did right. I think, and I think you're going to talk about this a little bit too, but combining this trip with something else and going to Zanzibar as well, I thought was really cool. And I think the length of our time at the safari camp, which was 4 nights, so it was basically 4.5 days of game drives and seeing wildlife, was pretty much perfect. I think I could see it, as much as that kind of beauty and special experience can get repetitive. I could see it getting a little repetitive on like day 5, 6, or 7 of this trip. And it also, crucially for us, helped keep costs down.
That's the biggest thing is, for I think for most people who are planning a safari, it starts at 7 days and might go to 10, it might even go to 2 weeks. And if you are able to do that, I'm sure you would have an amazing time, and the people who are taking care of you would take even better care of you and make sure that, you do some different things once you round the 7-day mark. But for real human beings like you and I, 7 days just is not possible on the wallet or the points balance. I mean, that would drain everything we have and then some, which is not the point of what we're talking about here.
Right. And it kept costs down, and every second was super special. And I never got bored of any. We saw 1,000 elephants, and I never got bored for a second. I don't know when we're going to do our elephants talk in this conversation. We'll do it in your section, but I'm ready to go off on my love for elephants.
This podcast might wind up being 90 minutes once we're talking about elephants. We'll see.
Yeah. But as far as things I wish I would have known, maybe some things I would have done differently. We did not bring enough cash on safari, which we didn't really know we'd need, but the connectivity was so limited in the Masai that some places, our hotel even had trouble charging credit cards, which we didn't need for many things. We were able to just check out with the one big bill at the end. But there's a big tipping culture in Africa, or in Kenya specifically. So we, like American level tipping is pretty much expected. And we brought a good amount of cash to Zanzibar, and we kind of tipped a little too hard too early, and by the end of it we had money laid out on the bed trying to think like, okay, we have to tip the guide, and we have to tip the butler, and so we were basically
rationing
tips at the end, which is so unfair because the best parts were all at the end, and we were
right.
Like, man, these people all deserve the proper tip. So bring enough cash. USD is good, especially in the Masai. From my experience, they were more than happy to accept that. No ATMs in the bush, though. We asked our guide about it, and he was like, yeah, there's one 45 minutes away if you want to do that today. I was like, no, we'll skip it. Thanks. But yeah, I think, I just said, I think the length of our trip was great, but maybe one more day I could have given it. That was another thing I could have just, maybe a 5th day would have been really cool. But again, to keep costs down, that's pretty much all we had at that point.
And so before we wrap up, how'd you get home?
We got home. The Gunnar Olson 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 saga was born out of this flight. We flew Turkish from Nairobi through Istanbul to Miami. 63,000 life miles each way per person. Really good redemption. And I actually got that from my Amex Platinum sign-up bonus way back then too. So that was a pretty comfy flight. Again, we didn't have suites on either leg of that flight, but it was, for all we knew, it was the greatest thing that had ever happened. And 2 very comfy flights. I would say everything in and around Nairobi International Airport, give yourself a ton of extra time. Just to drive into that airport, you have to go through security, for instance, and then you have to go through security to get into the check-in area, and then you have to go through security again to get to the gates. So it's a long process. Things run very slow there. So give yourself plenty of time. Our flight left at 4 a.m, and I think we were out of bed we stayed at an airport hotel that was 2 minutes away, and I think we were out of bed at like 1:30 or 2, and it felt tight. So we give yourself time. It was a weird experience at Nairobi International. So,
but worth every extra minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. All right, Kyle, it's your turn to talk safari, but before that, we're going to take a quick break.
We're going the extra mile on safaris today on the show and how to pull one off using credit card points and airline miles. But if you want to dive deeper into the world of points and miles every week, we've got a free newsletter for you. It's called, wait for it, The Extra Mile. Each and every Monday morning, our credit card guru Jackson Newman rounds up the biggest news from the past week of all things travel hacking. Expect the latest big credit card bonuses, airline mileage program guides, the best sweet spot redemptions, and a big dash of personality. And importantly, that personality is from Jackson and not from us, because nobody needs more of that.
Yeah, look, you've heard enough from us. Sign up for the Extra Mile newsletter now at thriftytraveler.com/extra mile, all one word. And then check your inbox on Monday mornings for the latest dose of points wizardry from Jackson. I know I love to see it every Monday morning. Again, it's also completely free, so you have nothing to lose here. Join the Extra Mile. Okay, back to the show.
All right, it's time to talk about my safari, and I could not be more excited. I feel like I've talked everybody who I know, I've talked their ear off about this, and I still can't talk about it enough because, like I said, this is one of the most life-changingly cool experiences I've ever had. So we're going to talk about elephants now because the elephants, for everything that my wife and I saw on our trip in late January, early February, and we saw a lot. We saw the big five within a matter of hours of being out on drives. But I will never in my life forget the first time I saw an elephant in the flesh that wasn't behind the glass of a zoo. They're just the most amazing animals that you feel like you can learn about them just by looking in their eyes.
Yeah, they're so social, which I was told. Like the guide was like, yeah, they're very social. They'll look at you. They're interested in you, especially the babies. And they're also like funny. And he said that that's an actual thing, is that elephants have a sense of humor. So they'll like do silly things to get a reaction out of each other and people in trucks like us. And I'll share a video in the YouTube of a bunch of elephants playing in just a really nasty muddy puddle, and it just looked like the most fun ever. If the risk of being crushed by an elephant was
your wife had to hold you back. Gunnar, no, we're not doing it. Gunnar Olson Olson.
Yeah, but elephants are so. We talked about it as soon as you got back. I was like, "What was your favorite part?" You're like, "Elephants." It's like, yes, okay, yeah. You're right. They're the best. It was so special.
So when my wife and I did this trip, we had to do things a little bit differently than you. I mean, you also kind of made this part of a bigger trip, but we were really pressed for time on our trip because for reasons that I can't exactly explain, the trip started in Istanbul. I can't explain it, but it still is not going to make a lot of sense. And then we ended the trip before flying home to the States in Cape Town. And so we had tried to figure out what we wanted to do in between. Do we want to go to the beach? Do we want to go like you did to Zanzibar, which is something we considered? Do we want to go to Mauritius, the island off the coast of Southern Africa? And ultimately, we decided, like you did, we're going to be in Africa. Let's make a safari happen. But we really could do about 2 nights maximum. And so we had to make some difficult choices, but choices that were well worth it of how to kind of be strategic about where we were going in order to make this a reality. And it ended up working really well. It was an unorthodox way to do a safari. I will tell you that. It was a very challenging puzzle. It was probably one of the hardest kind of trip bookings from start to finish that we had ever done. And it took us many months to actually get everything booked and decide what we were going to do. But man, what a cool trip.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, how did you find the flight? Like you said, this trip started in Istanbul, not exactly your traditional jumping off point for a safari.
When I told my wife that our trip to South Africa was going to start in Istanbul, I got a look. I'll put it that way. But the pieces came together. It started because in early 2024, just over a year ago, Turkish Airlines announced that they were going to be raising award rates on all of their flights within a matter of just a couple of weeks. And so the price of flying business class from the United States to Istanbul was going to jump from 45,000 miles each way to 65,000 miles each way. And I had at the time, from a previous sign-up bonus and some additional spending, about exactly 90,000 points in a Citi Thank You account from a Citi Strata Premier card. And when the universe tells you it's time to go back to Istanbul, which we've talked about before is one of my favorite cities in the world, you listen to the universe and you book that trip. So, without talking about it a whole lot, I booked those flights and we started piecing things together. So it was 45,000 miles each way, plus about $230 in taxes to fly from Chicago to Istanbul. And we used some Sky Miles to get from Minneapolis to Chicago earlier in that morning, gave ourselves a pretty good 4-hour buffer, which ended up turning into an hour and 15-minute buffer due to a delay getting off the ground. That is why you give yourself as much time as possible, if not departing the night before one of these big transatlantic or transpacific trips. And then, so we had that done, and we start talking about, okay, South Africa, what do we want to do? Where else do we want to go? Cape Town has always been on our list. And we were actually on a trip last year going through French Polynesia, Australia, and New Zealand. And in Queenstown, New Zealand, I woke up to a text message from Thrifty Traveler Premium, unicorn alert, Qatar Q Suites availability, not just, to and from the US and Doha, but also all the way down to South Africa. And like I said before, we had hoped to book these flights using American Advantage miles. I had been saving some from a couple of sign-up bonuses between both my wife and I, who also, opened the Barclays card, bought a pack of gum, saved those points. But by the time, 2024 rolled around, as we were trying to plan this trip, it was just not possible to book almost anything operated by Qatar in business class using American miles. So in this case, the alert that we sent our premium members was booking with Qatar or British Airways Avios, 95,000 Avios each way and about $250 in taxes each. So definitely not cheap, but by having welcome bonuses and just ongoing spending on Amex Gold cards, that which both my wife and I carry, just to spend at the grocery store, at restaurants, and referring some friends for that card because it's the card that we talk about the most, we had enough to make it happen. So yeah, 95,000. We transferred those points from American Express, and all of a sudden we've got a flight to Istanbul, and then a flight home from Cape Town, and plenty of time at that point, because this was late February 2024. Plenty of time to figure out what happened in between, and that's when the plans for a safari really started to come together.
Yeah. So you did Istanbul, Doha, Cape Town in Q Suites, and then Cape Town, Doha home.
We did Istanbul, Doha, Johannesburg, because that was this was the thing is, like I said, we really only had 2-3 nights at most in order to kind of squeeze in this safari trip. And so much as I would have loved to go to the Masai Mara like you did, that just isn't possible for a lot of safari destinations, because once you start thinking about the travel time to get to, not just Nairobi, not just Johannesburg or Cape Town, but get from there to where you need to go, and get in a car for a couple of hours, and then get on a bush flight and pay an additional $400, $500, $600 on top of everything else you've already done. That was just time that we didn't have. Yeah. So we started looking for a safari destination in South Africa that was a little bit closer and was going to allow us to have some precious time on the ground, go out on game drives every single day without burning a lot of travel time and additional money in order to do it. And so we ended up finding 2 prime candidates. There's 2 major airports, not major, they're relatively small, but they have commercial aircraft service on the edge of the Greater Kruger National Park. There's Mbombela, and there's Hoedspruit, which is ultimately what we ended up flying into, because we found a safari lodge that just looked incredible, and it was.
What was that airport like? Was it really small, or was it like kind of mid-size?
It was a very outdoor airport, but they had a couple of shops, they had a restaurant, they had security, pretty limited security, but that's what you'll find in a lot of places outside the United States and Europe that aren't major airport hubs. But it was still a lot of fun. It kind of felt like a blast from the past.
I just love small airports. There's something about just like a really simple airport, like the bus stop style airports, that are just my favorite.
It's so much fun. It makes the travel day a lot better too.
Yeah. So how from that airport to Greater Kruger, the national park, what's that travel like?
We flew into Hoedspruit from Johannesburg after flying in on Qatar Airways that morning. So we got to Johannesburg at about 3:30 a.m., booked an airport hotel that was basically connected to the airport using a Delta Amex Gold card, because it has the $100 credit each year. And this is the perfect way to use it for that kind of must have. Either, you're somewhere for a wedding and you just need one hotel night, or, in our case, we just needed a place to lay down for a handful of hours rather than being stuck inside the terminal. So it covered all but I think $8 of our hotel stay early that morning. And then we flew Airlink, one of the major airlines within South Africa, from Johannesburg to Hoedspruit. And then from there, it was about a 35-minute drive to our lodge from the airport, which is, again, when you talk about saving time to make sure you can go do what you want to do and not, burn an entire day to get to places that I'm sure are absolutely incredible, but it was well worth it. And then we ended up at our lodge, which was called Imagine Africa Safari Lodge, just outside of Hoedspruit, which was, I just can't say enough good things. There were 5 luxury tents. That's it. When we got there, there was a pair of other guests, and they left the next morning, which meant that for more than half of our time, we were the only guests at this lodge.
I want to talk about the tent thing for a second, because our safari camp was a tented camp resort. So every single one of the rooms was like a big glamping tent. And I'll share a video that I also have from our glamping tent there. But they're not like what you'd think of when you think of glamping. It's not as simple as like an under canvas setup, which are still very nice. This is, built in year round, big bathroom. There's a bathtub in it. There was, a big shower, a stone shower. And, these places are very nice, but they are tented camps. So you're going to get a lot of outside noise. At ours, we had, for instance, a bunch of hippo noise all night, and they just would serenade us with their grossest, gaseous sounds.
You had me until gaseous sounds. I was like, nobody's going to complain about hippo sounds. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, just so, if you are really worried about it, I promise you it's so comfy and fancy, and I'm sure yours is the same way. But a lot of these places are tented camps, so beware of that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's part of the experience to, have this amazing tent, which is air conditioned, has a fully functioning bathroom, a very comfortable bed, a nice deck that overlooks a watering hole where, that is where we were when, about 2 hours after arriving, a family of elephants walked up and started drinking from the watering hole and playing around and eating shrub bushes. It's just the coolest thing. Imagine Africa Safari Lodge outside of Hoedspruit. It was about $1,500 for 2 nights. We were there. We ended up being there for basically 2.5 days, but that includes 2 game drives a day, one early in the morning, as you recommended, which definitely those were our best game drives that we had. One later in the afternoon, kind of getting into dinner time when you end up getting back. All of our meals, we would go out on an early morning drive and and stop after 2 or 3 hours and have a coffee and watch hippos swim around. And then we'd go out on the evening drive shortly before dinner, and right before driving back to the lodge would stop for sundown or happy hour and, have a gin and tonic with some classic South African jerky. Just the most amazing thing. And best of all, we booked it using a Capital One card, which meant as soon as that purchase cleared, we went back and erased the entire thing using 150-ish thousand Capital One Venture miles. So it was, I think there's a temptation to look at that and say, oh, well, you only got 1 cent per mile that you use. You could have gotten double, triple, quadruple that by transferring them to Virgin Atlantic and booking ANA business class to Tokyo. And you know what? I don't care. It was far and away the coolest thing we've ever done using miles, and I will never regret it for a second.
Yeah, I think Capital One is kind of perfect. If you're going to just pick up one card to go do a safari like this, that Capital One Venture X is, you're going to be hard pressed to beat that one, just because those Capital One points, you can do that, what they, formerly known as purchase eraser, and now I think it's cover your purchase with points. It really rolls off the tongue. Yeah. But you can go back and cover these things at these smaller boutique outfits, and same thing with the airlines that Safari Link and some of these really tiny airlines within Africa that are going to take you to exactly where you want to be are not you're not going to get a lot of alliance benefits out of them. Nope. These are really scrappy little operations. So but they're coding as travel, so you can go back and cover a lot of these purchases with those points.
Yep, and having a Capital One card with that $300 travel credit on the Venture X card, that's how we booked our flights within Africa on Airlink, flying from Johannesburg to Hoedspruit, and then from Hoedspruit down to Cape Town, which is where we spent basically the final week of our trip before eventually heading home in Qatar Q Suites. Again, one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life, everything. What stands out to you most about your own safari?
I think I underestimated the travel just to get to the Masai. That part stands out to me still. Like it's a day to get out there from Zanzibar. I thought, it's a quick hop and then a transfer to another airport and another quick hop. It's not that simple. Things are never that simple in Africa. Things move a little slow. But I just remember when things were moving slow, just not caring at all, especially when you're out in the Masai and these beautiful places. And I think a lot of the things that stuck out to me weren't just the seeing incredible animals. It was a lot of the cultural elements of being with the Masai people, and just, seeing a group of people who have taken back their, I guess they never lost their land, but they've taken control of the tourism. I mean, the Masai people were running every single aspect of everything that happens in that world there in the Masai Mara. And it's so beautiful, and they protect it, with their lives because they have to. And I just remember just learning a lot every day around those campfires. And my wife and I were in awe just the whole time. And obviously seeing all the animals, seeing a giraffe in person is something really crazy too. And there are so many examples of that: a cheetah, a leopard, things that I'm not a I guess I've never traveled to go see wildlife before. I'm usually like let me go hike that mountain kind of traveler. I'm not let me see how many birds or how many animals I can see here. But that kind of changed things for me. It's, maybe it was turning 30 or maybe it was going on safari, but now I'm like, oh, what's that bird? So maybe a little extra curiosity for me for the other species.
I'm still so delightfully surprised that we could do a safari and have an amazing time and not feel inordinately rushed in just 2 nights. I think another night would have been amazing if we had the time, if we could have afforded it. But I think you truly can pull this off as part of a broader trip, as long as you're in the right corner of the globe, and do it in just 2 or 3 nights, which again was pretty surprising. I mean, I am never in my life, like I said, gonna forget the first moment we saw those elephants walk up. I will never forget the feeling of tracking a pride of lions for a couple of days and, worrying, are these cubs going to make it? They look pretty thin. And then the morning before we left on our final game drive, we found them after taking down a water buffalo, and they had stomachs so full, it was like comical. Seeing those same lions the night before walking, kind of stalking around elephants, and they just form this phalanx and just start sounding off to protect their young because they had a couple of babies behind them, these elephants. I mean, just amazing things. Truly, truly amazing, life-changingly cool things that, again, would never have happened to us had we not put in the time to learn about these things and put in the time and resources to redeem credit card points and airline miles to make that stuff a reality.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I did not think if I were to ever go on safari, I thought I was going to have to hitch my wagon to someone way richer than me, or fly economy and just scrape it together, or just maybe just have to go back to the zoo. So the fact that I was able to do this is something I'll never forget for sure. I know you have the same impression. But 2 really excellent safaris, 2 very different safaris. But this is all easy to pull off. But I would stress, and I've said this a few times on the podcast before, but you really need to be way out ahead of this stuff, especially if you want to lie flat to get there. And if you want to book the best places, I would say you need to have a 15-month head start on doing this. Maybe that's a little aggressive, but I would say, the flights especially, you're going to need to be booking 10, 11 months out. And for some of the place, like for instance, we wanted to stay at Giraffe Manor in Nairobi. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's the place where the giraffes like poke their heads into the restaurant and will eat breakfast with you. And I was ready to book that 12 months ahead of when we wanted to stay there, and it was gone, all booked up. So a lot of these places are pretty competitive. Everyone wants to go there. So I would say get out way ahead of it. It'll make for the best experience possible.
Yeah, and I think if I can leave people with anything about going into this, it takes a lot to put all these puzzle pieces together, but ultimately you're going there to go out on game drives. And we heard some horror stories from our guides about, really entitled guests who, expected to go out and see a lion within 30 minutes or to see a leopard on their first day. And we were really, really lucky. We were incredibly lucky to see the big 5 within less than a day of being there. But man, the bush owes you nothing. This place is wild and free and unpredictable. And so you need to go into it with as minimal amount of expectations as possible, because I promise you, you are going to see something that you will never see again in your life and you won't see anywhere else on the globe. And that is really cool.
Yeah, nature definitely calls the shots when you're on safari in Africa.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point as well. All right, it's time for our listener question of the week, but instead of a listener question, we're going to get some listener feedback of the week. We have a listener named Kyle. It's
Not me,
Not you.
just so we're clear.
But Kyle thought we missed the mark on our take about the Hyatt Free Night Award certificate that we talked about a few weeks ago. That's the yearly kind of categories 1 through 4 free night you get with the World of Hyatt credit card. In his note, Kyle said, "I'm a fan of Thrifty Traveler and enjoying the show so far. I do take a bit of umbrage, though, with how you discuss the Hyatt Free Night cert on this week's show. I believe the quote is, 'There aren't a lot of special ways to use them.'" Kyle goes on to say, "I certainly know what you mean about getting outsized value, but for a podcast and website called Thrifty Traveler, I think it's important to remember that the special thing is the travel itself. Not everyone in Points and Miles or using Thrifty Traveler is trying to get to the Four Seasons. They're just trying to see as much of the world as they can for as cheap as they can. Most of the Points and Miles world is full of influencers who spit on economy flights and inexpensive hotels. Please don't try to take that market share from them." Kyle, did other Kyle just accuse us of being out of touch?
He did, and I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah.
I think we stepped in it a little bit in the hotels episode, where we focused primarily on whether Hilton was gunning for Hyatt's crown as the best hotel program. I think what we should have said is that, as you know, Hyatt has on a yearly basis reshuffled these award categories and moved hotels that were category 3 or 4 up to 5 or 6, and therefore limited how many of them are eligible for these free night certificates. It's just gotten harder to organically build a fun trip and use these certificates in a way that's truly useful, versus doing something like randomly booking a hotel or a staycation just in order to redeem it. What we shouldn't have said is that there aren't special ways to do this. It's about outsized value versus it just being valuable. And that ultimately is super personal. So yeah, Kyle called us on it, and I think he was right. And we sent him a note back saying, "You know what, other Kyle, you are absolutely right." And again, I think he was.
Yeah, Kyle, I think you nailed it. We're very conscious here of making sure that we're not hitting maximum value too hard. Maximum value. It's a kind of a mantra that's pretty annoying in Points and Miles writing, and in this world in particular, because that means something different for everybody. And your category 1 through 4 free night certificate with Hyatt can absolutely be hugely valuable and create awesome experiences. And you don't have to stay at a 5-star hotel to have the trip of your life. So you're absolutely right there, Kyle.
His quote, which I think we should end with, is, "I think it's important to remember that the special thing is the travel itself," is going to stick with me for a while. So thank you, other Kyle, for reaching out to us and calling us on it. You were right.
Yep. Kyle, you nailed it. Thank you. If you want us to answer your question, or you have some feedback for us, email us at podcast@thriftytraveler.com, and your question might be featured on next week's show.
All right, Gunnar, it's my turn to put you on the spot. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Come on.
All right. So in the vein of Hilton and Hyatt, it was almost a year ago when I first pitched the story to you. Is it time for us to think about whether Hilton does deserve the crown? And you were skeptical, to say the least. Not an hour before starting to record this show, you told me you opened a Hilton Surpass card to earn some points and a Hilton free night certificate. So to put you on the spot, how does that crow taste, Gunnar?
The crow tastes amazing. I got my email for my free night award already, and it took me about a year to earn that with Hyatt. So no, you absolutely helped convince me over time. I think that first meeting where we discussed this for about 25 minutes and took over one of our Thrifty Traveler meetings, where our poor coworkers had to sit there and listen to this. And I think that might have been where the podcast even started, was partially in that discussion, where everyone was like, "All right, you guys need to record this and get it out in the world." But
anything so we didn't have to subject them to it.
Yeah, right. They're like, if
we get to torture the rest of you now.
Please stop talking. But yeah, no, I've joined the Hilton universe, and I'm excited to see what's over there, what's going on in that pool. So it's warm so far. Pool's warm, keeping it in the mid 80s. That's good.
Let's kill this metaphor and this show.
Yep. Let's end this show mercifully. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrifty Traveler podcast. Rate us 5 stars on your podcast platform of choice, please. And also like and subscribe to Thrifty Traveler on YouTube. And then send this episode to someone you know that wants to go on safari, or someone who needs a vacation or needs a good way to use their Hyatt Free Night Award certificate. And like I said, if you have feedback for us, send us a note at podcast@thriftytraveler.com. We'd love to hear from you. Kyle, tell us about the Thrifty Traveler podcast team.
This episode was produced by our senior editor and credit card expert, Jackson Newman, and your favorite crow-eating host, Gunnar Olson. It was edited by David Strutt. Our theme music is by Benjamin Tissot. See you next week.
See you next week.